Did we?
Incorporated all the.
Does it say, is it in the packet? Yeah.
So it's all set?
Yeah, I thought I saw it in the packet. You
Okay.
made me stop and think.
It wasn't in.
No, not in the online.
Good evening and welcome to the Thursday, November 7th, 2019 Monomoy Regional School Committee meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 6:35. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the October 24th meeting. Is there any questions or discussion?
I move to approve the minutes from October 24th.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Any noes? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Yes, please. Just please state your name.
Hi, my name is Cindy Gushie, and I live in Howardport. I work at Howard Elementary School, and I am on the MTA statewide ESP committee. I'd like to tell you a little bit about National Education Support Professional ESP Day. This year it is on Wednesday, November 20th, which is the Wednesday of American Education Week. ESPs include instructional, SPED assistants, and other paraprofessionals, administrative assistants, clerical, secretaries, cafeteria staff, recess monitors, bus drivers, custodial staff, health assistants, and technical services. ESPs keep students healthy, safe, supported, and challenged so they are ready to learn. They have a wealth of knowledge, experience, passion, and play critical roles in the school community. They make up a third of the education workforce. I am here to ask that you as a committee, or to ask Dr. Carpenter, to recognize all of the ESPs that are part of the Monomoy school family. Ways that other schools are honoring ESPs are through proclamations, news releases, social media posts, individual emails, small tokens of appreciation, and announcements in individual schools on the day of the event, such as a public service announcement. I hope that you will take the time to honor these valuable employees. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you just repeat the date?
Yep. It's Wednesday, November 20th.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other, no, I didn't see any other questions. Okay, great, thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is, yes, sorry, Charles, I didn't see you. I looked earlier, but your hand wasn't up.
I'm back. Charles Gruska, 6 T-Berry Ave, Harwich. I wasn't able to attend the last meeting. I was at a retirement event in Central Mass, a former colleague. But I did, as I usually do when I'm not able to attend the meeting, I did record on Channel 22 and viewed the recording of the meeting because I was unable to be present. First thing, the agenda comes onto the screen when you watch Channel 22, and I was pleasantly surprised to see the item on the agenda to discuss the idea of adding a second public comment time to school committee agendas. If I were able to be present at the last meeting, I probably would have spoken during public comment time. But just to thank whomever was responsible for placing the item onto the school committee agenda. It made me feel like my input had been considered and was found at least worthy of discussion. And I was grateful to the committee to have the committee take up discussion on that item, and it was an extent, I timed it at 20-minute discussion, so pretty lengthy for an item like that. However, having viewed the 20-minute discussion on the item, I do have some additional comments to be made, spawned by the discussion that you had. In the discussion, Ms. Stout pointed out that public comment period takes place prior to the discussion of any agenda items by the committee, and that the discussion itself can prompt questions and additional thoughts. Personally, I often find that to be the case. And in fact, what prompted me to request consideration for an additional public comment time to begin with was a few meetings previous. The presentation on preschool models raised a question in my mind, and I wanted to be certain that I was understanding the facts correctly. Because public comment period had gone by, I was unable to ask my question, although a question was taken from someone else in the audience, but I was correctly pointed out that public comment period had ended. And so I I held that thought, respecting. I agreed with the rule of the chair that that's the way things need to operate. That's the rules of the committee. So I was unable to ask my question. I thought it would be good that if there was another opportunity provided after school committee discussed agenda items to provide the public an opportunity to ask questions or share input. That would be a good idea based on my experiences here. I was disappointed that at the last meeting, the school committee voted on a motion to establish a second public comment period to be held at its meetings before an opportunity for members of the public could add their thoughts to the discussion held among the committee members. As a result, I was relieved that the committee voted in the affirmative on the motion. Thus, this is the first public comment period since you discussed the item and took an immediate vote on it the same evening at the meeting. So I have the following thoughts that I believe are important to share with the committee as a follow-up to your deliberations on this matter at the last meeting. One of the key principles that was driven home to me in my studies in psychology and counselor training is that perception is the reality. Perception is the reality. And at its previous meeting, the school committee voted approval on its goals for the year, one of which was an excellent goal, I thought, to expand communication with the community. At times, as I was listening to the discussion, as I was reviewing the recording about public comment time at school committee meetings, I was getting the perception that the school committee might not be serious about that goal. And I became worried that the perception might get extended to others in the community besides me. I know you well, and I know all of your good intentions, but I was picking up that kind of perception that we're talking about how important it is to expand communication with the community, and then having a hard time just extending some public hearing time on the school committee meeting. I was more concerned about whether that perception would be picked up by others in the community and read it the wrong way. Another key principle that I learned in my studies and training is that tone of voice and body language is 70 to 90% of the message. And I could give you examples and demonstrate that. But the same words can convey a very different message based on the tone of voice and body language with which it is delivered. And what that implies is that the most preferred form of communication is carried out face-to-face. I used to tell my teachers and staff that if they had an important message to deliver to a parent, colleague, supervisor, that the preferred way to deliver that message was in person, face-to-face. I could have emailed my comments to you during the past 2 weeks, but I wanted to deliver the comments face-to-face and in person. Right now, the only opportunity that a member of the public has to deliver a message to the entire school committee at once, in person, face-to-face, is during the public comment time during a school committee meeting. Public comment time, therefore, should be viewed as a very important part of every school committee meeting. And if you're serious about your goal, hopefully you'll welcome as much public comment, questions, ideas as possible. And time shouldn't be a factor in length of meetings. I know efficiency is highly valued, but effectiveness always trumps efficiency. And I know when I was applying for an open position on the committee short term, I was the only candidate who wouldn't commit to actually running the next time the election was around because I didn't know if I could commit myself to the lengthy meetings and number of meetings and all that's involved in being on the school committee. But all of you have. You've made that commitment, and it's always important to do your job as effectively as possible. And I think an important part of that is hearing from those in the community that want to share something that's important to them with you out of the goodness of their heart and their interest for education in the community. The comment that I welcomed the most during this discussion came from the superintendent, who suggested that perhaps the route to go on this was to allow public comment in real time while the school committee was discussing an agenda item. He pointed out that over the years the committee has allowed and even invited input from the audience, from someone who has had experience or expertise related to the matter under discussion or just had some thoughts to share that could be brought to the table to add quality to the discussion. Good example is if I were here at the last meeting, you had a very important discussion on the Castle in the Clouds playground and had to make some very important decisions there. I happen to have a lot of experience with Leathers playgrounds, having overseen right from the start of the design and planning process to the building. I actually tightened every lug nut on the playground that was built in my community. I was the final tightener, took that very responsible, hoping that nothing would ever collapse and I would be responsible for one of my students being injured. To being present when students first had an opportunity to go on that playground and see what that meant to them, to dealing with all the splinters and other issues that Ms. Oldak has had to deal with in her experience, to eventually seeing that playground have to be put to its grave. That experience tells me that a Leathers playground is very special and very unique. It's not a typical playground. It's magical. It's more than a play area. It's designed to spawn creative imagination. And for students, children, it means more than any typical playground. I've seen it in my own family. I have two granddaughters that come from Auburn to visit, and one who lives in Brewster. And though we have Brooks Park right around the corner with its beautiful playground, there was, my granddaughters always wanted to go over to Harwich Elementary School to play in that playground. And what I also realized, a lot of my training was in grief and loss. And I thought that that was going to be a grieving experience for a number of people. People like myself who had put so much into building a playground, to see its demise, and all the children and students who had found it to be a magical place. Well, long and short is, if I were here last meeting, I would have wanted to get up, but there wouldn't have been an opportunity. I would have supported some thinking about what Dr. Carpenter had suggested in his original suggestion, which was to give a couple of days and a weekend to let people have their last experience with the playground. And I know you've made the absolute right decision. That playground had to be closed down, had to be shut down. But we've been living with carcinogens in the wood for a long time, splinters in the wood. I would have thought that an opportunity to say a final goodbye to the playground, sort of wake the playground. I would have supported that idea and concept as was originally presented. But that's an area where some expertise and experience could have brought to the play. I don't know it would have made any difference in the decisions of the committee, but I just use that as an example of why I like the idea of that the superintendent shared about taking public input and questions on the fly as part of the discussion. Because you never know where somebody may have some idea or thought that might have an impact on the important decisions you make. The question in the room that everyone wants to ask but is afraid to ask is what prompts somebody to come to school committee meetings on a regular basis when there's not a big hot item or any direct item that they're particularly interested in. In my case, I'm an education nerd. You know, there are Harry Potter nerds, there are tech nerds, there are accordion nerds. I'm an education nerd. I happen to believe firmly that the most important work going on in this community, besides the work going on in homes and in our families and our homes, is the work going on in the schools. And that makes your work very, very important because you set the policy and provide the resources for that work, which I think is the second most important piece of work that's going on in the community. And third, because I do have a wealth of experience and background and understanding. I've kept up with the field. I still maintain my membership in professional organizations. And I've been there and done that on a lot of things. And so I have a desire, if I can be helpful and can lend an idea or a thought out of that experience, I'd love to help the community and help the school committee in that way. So I wanted to deliver those messages in person, face to face, because that's the way you actually see a person's attitude, sincerity, warmth, or lack thereof. You could get emails, but emails are often misinterpreted. because all you read is the words. Statements on social media often get misinterpreted. And I'd rather see people come here and talk to you face to face than try to get the message to you by saying something that is amiss and spreading it all throughout social media. I'd love to encourage more people to do that, but it's not the kind of thing that people just prioritize. So those were thoughts that I wanted to share relevant to that discussion. I also know you mentioned about brainstorming about your public hearing, and that's great steps to go face to face with public hearings. I attended the Carolyn Coppola did Municipal Finance 101 for the community last year. I attended that at the Brooks Library. It was a great session on understanding total municipal finance. One thought I had that might make for a good short introduction to a public meeting, since we're starting budget time, is a brief presentation, as I've said before, on just the basic steps in school budget 101. How is a school budget formulated? I really do believe the majority of the public does not know that, doesn't understand it. Not into the weeds, but just the basic, and showing where does the parent community and the community at large fit into that process, because they have a very important role along the way in that process. And then, opening the floor to any questions or input about budget right up front early in the process, rather than waiting for public hearings or after everything is put together. It might be helpful to get the input. And then to just throw the floor open to general. I'd love to have you call those sessions school committee listening sessions, and encourage people that you're coming to listen. And as you did with the very successful meeting you had last year, just throw the floor open to all the questions right up front, put them on the chart, have everyone's question or concern recognized, and then see how much time you have left in the meeting and try to address and let people leave thinking that they've been recognized in their question or concern. So I know I far exceeded my 5 minutes. I appreciate the chair in allowing me to do that, and thank you very much for extending to the second public hearing, and I hope you will mull in the back of your mind, taking it now one step further and opening up where discussion input could be sought during the discussion of important agenda items. Dr. Carpenter had suggested a statement under public hearing that public input will be allowed during the hearing discussion of items. I don't think it's going to extend the meetings immensely in terms of length, and in terms of the people who come. When you have the ones, once in a blue mooners where there's one item and you've got the hall filled, you're probably going to want to have a special meeting just on that topic anyway, to hear people on the day-to-day. I think it's going to be fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Charles.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda would be recognitions. Dr. Carpenter?
I just have one in your packet. I'd like to thank World Strides for providing some digital gift cards to the Costa Rica field trip that Dustin Burns is organizing, to provide materials to support that trip to Costa Rica coming up this spring.
Great, thank you. Reports and discussions. Is there someone here to present the New Hampshire day trip? Oh, yeah, here she is, right around the corner.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Emily Jutras of the Oak Street Academy Alternative Ed intern sub for George Sopel. The kids and I have been working a lot on team building since the start of the year, and something that we've done when we get a chance is we take hikes on the different trails around Cape Cod. And so something that we've been talking about is achieving goals and different things like that, and the metaphor of climbing a mountain. And we came up with the idea that we should just climb a mountain together. So we planned this trip to hike Mount Monadnock White Dot Trail, which is a hike that I've done in the past with students. It's very family-friendly, wide trail, kind of a beginner kind of hike. It's a 2.5 hour, roughly, to hike just shy of 2 miles up to the summit. And it takes a little shy of 2 hours to get back down. I have 4 students who would like to attend the trip, and one other chaperone, my teaching assistant, Nick Seeley, who would be joining me. On the page that I passed around is the intended itinerary for the trip, and the time we're hoping to keep for the day.
It's coming around.
In our packets too.
It varies a little bit.
Oh, here it is.
Are there, well, I'll wait for it to get around, but while it's coming around, are there any questions? Tina?
I don't have any questions. I'm just a big fan of the program. And I just wanted to say, I love the theme, Climb the Mountain Together. What a nice metaphor.
Yeah,
Very good.
They were pretty excited about it. I mean, not every kid was excited. I only have 4 of my 8. Some of them were, a little nervous about it. But I'm hoping it's a trip that we could make something annual for the program. We've been trying to build traditions this year, and I'm hoping that this can be one of them.
Thank you.
You can do a trip to Keene State while you're up there.
Yeah, I know. We can go check out the college. Why not?
Not pushing Keene State at all, I'm just saying you could visit it. Give me an alumni sticker. Any other questions or discussion? Time-wise, do you need a vote on this tonight? It's November 25th, so
I don't think
preferably.
so. Preferably, but I believe there was another date I was emailed right before the trip, which
2
is
weeks
fine.
from now.
Oh, yeah.
Right, but sometimes with trips, we just push them through, unless anybody opposes to pushing this one through. Sharon?
I just have a question.
Sure.
For all of the field trips we have, whether they're local or something like this or out of the country, all of them have the parent permission for them, right?
Yeah, I wanted to gain approval before I put it out to parents and got their permission, since it was such a different kind of trip for this program.
Great, thank you.
Terry?
A great idea. I've done that several times, same setting with kids. My only question is, probably my age, gets dark about 4:30 now, 20 past 4, and you're completing your hike back at 4.
Yep.
So I
we'll
guess you
be-
just need to be sensitive to that.
Yeah, we just have to make sure that we are on time and are at the bottom of the mountain by 4, because by 4:45 it will be dark.
Okay. Great, is there a motion? Nancy?
I move to approve the Oak Street Academy hiking trip to Jafford, New Hampshire.
I would second that.
Terry, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Any? Nope, no abstentions. Motion carries.
Thank you so
Have fun,
much.
be
Thank
safe.
you.
Thanks.
Have fun.
Thank you.
Bring your first aid kit.
Yes, thank you. Lots of fun.
Next on the agenda is the FY '21 budget discussion.
Just a brief update. We are in the process of wrapping up meeting with each of the administrators and the central office staff to look at the FY '21 budget and what the wants are, or the needs are in each of the buildings. So we'll be using that information to compile the sort of first draft of FY '21, and then we'll be bringing in the finance subcommittee to start discussing that. We've met with both boards of selectmen for their initial budget conversations, and I just shared this past Monday at Harwich. We were presenting our enrollment data, and when it comes to the assessments that each town is given by the school district, one of the big drivers is the number of students that are attending. And I was just foreshadowing for Harwich that Harwich is blessed in many ways to actually be seeing more students in our schools this year compared to last year. So we're seeing a slight increase in the number of children from Harwich. On the other hand, Chatham continues to be losing children, and it's not just losing children to other school districts, it's just losing children in terms of the number of kids available to be in our public school system, so that we see a depression in the number of students attending from Chatham, a slight increase from Harwich, and was just foreshadowing that should likely create a situation where there's an increase towards Harwich before we even get into any sort of budget increase that the the overall 21 budget might have. So, so it creates a challenge that we were just sharing there. But again, we'll be doing on our end what we can to keep the overall percent increase of the budget as low as we can.
Great, thank you very much. Cultural Proficiency Feedback Summary Report, Mark Smith, Director of the CIA.
Just give me a second here. All right. Mark Smith, Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment. How is everybody tonight?
We're good.
Good.
All right, excellent.
Living the dream.
Living the dream. So what I want to provide is a little summary of our professional development day that we had on October 11th, the Friday before the Columbus Day weekend. Last time I was here, I presented some of our discrepancy data and our achievement gap data, and one of the things that I mentioned was that we were having one of our action steps was to start a cultural proficiency training within the district, and that we had a particular day event planned coming up on the 11th. So as part of that, we sent out feedback surveys to the staff, and the morning session was broken into two parts. And the first part was me presenting similar data that I presented here. I went a little bit deeper in a couple of the areas, but essentially the same presentation that I provided to you. I went a little where this presentation here was focused only on MCAS. I also went in and looked at grades at the high school and the middle school, disaggregated. We looked at AP enrollment, honors enrollment, suspension data. I think those are all the main categories that we went into, and again had that data disaggregated just to talk about trends and patterns that we were seeing across the district. So that was about 90 minutes in the morning. Then there was a brief break, and then we had planned to have Dr. Khalees Warnham, who does training in cultural proficiency. She came and did a 2-hour presentation. Then there was a break for lunch, and then the staff went back to their buildings, and they had some building-based activities which continued that on back at the building level. So what I want to share with you is the feedback that we got for the morning sessions, the 2 morning sessions. And I've shared this data, this actual copy of this presentation has already gone out to the district. And it first shared it with the admin team, and then it went out to the teachers that participated. And then Dr. Carpenter, that would be a good idea for me also to come and just give you a rundown for what we got back. So that's what we got here. So first, as far as a response rate, so on the 11th, just as a reminder, that's a work day for the teaching staff and the administrative assistants. It wasn't a work day for the instructional assistants based on their contract. So we didn't have the full district there, but we had all the teachers and not all the administrative assistants, the building-based administrative assistants. So that was everybody got the email, and so we got a response rate for my session of 109 respondents, and for Dr. Warnham, 114 respondents. So I broke they essentially got the same set of questions, or not essentially, they did get the same set of questions for the 2 different presentations, and I use this same set of questions for every one of these larger PDs, so that we have a consistent sort of mechanism to compare from one to the other. So the first question we asked was to have them rate the content expertise of the lead presenter. So again, this is for me, 1 being low, 5 being high. So you can see most people felt I at least sort of knew what I was talking about, a 3, 4, or a 5. And then the next was about my ability to gauge the participants in professional learning, and about the same, a 3, 4, or 5. I think some people, as I read into all the comments, which I'll talk about in a minute, some people didn't feel like a data presentation was a professional learning opportunity. That was sort of what a fair number, there was enough respondents in order for me to note it. The next question asked them to think a little bit about whether or not this provided them with something that they could apply directly to their practice. So you can see more than half of people said yes, but then another large chunk of people said maybe. So that's about almost 90% of the people said either yes or maybe. And as I was talking with the admin staff, the purpose and the structure of my presentation wasn't actually to give them instructional practice. That was with Dr. Warnham to come later, and you'll see there's a big difference between she and I on this one. As I told them when we started the presentation was my presentation was, one, to give them the information, and two, to establish the why. Like, why were we then going to have a cultural proficiency trainer coming in? That we had discovered this achievement gap data, and that this was our first step towards addressing it. So it was to give them the why. So the question is a little misleading, or it doesn't match what the intent of the presentation was. But like I said, I like to use the consistent questions every time. The next question was about whether or not they recommend it to their professional or to their colleagues. You could see most people either yes or maybe, and somebody wisely put that all their colleagues were already in the room, which is a good point. Because there's an other category, and then they have an option to type in what they want, so you can, that's a very good point. Then there was two sections that allowed just essentially free-flowing comment. And the first asked them to summarize their takeaways from the presentation that I gave. So there's a link in this, again, I sent this presentation out to the staff so they can actually go click that link and it'll bring them to the actual comments. They're all anonymous, but they can read word for word what people put in. But in order, I summarized that, and the comments fell essentially into three large buckets. The first one being about the achievement gap. Most people recognized that there were achievement gaps here in Monomoy, and that we don't appear to have equity, and that there's some work for us to do to close those gaps. And then sort of carrying on that theme, a lot of people talked about that there's a lot of work to do, and it was really positively focused, like, okay, now we need to dig in and move forward and work to address this. And also a lot of people reflected that Monomoy has a lot of positions of strength from which to engage in this work. Because that was also part of the presentation, was highlighting some of the strengths across the district. And then there were questions. So some people sort of questioned the data itself, like how many students were represented in some of the groups. Was it statistically significant? There's always sort of, you can almost in any data presentation, you can find some people who are just generally skeptical of data. Like data can say whatever you want it to say, like those types of comments. So there were definitely a couple of those. And some people commented on sort of just the way I presented the data, that they would have rather seen it a different way. And that just is what it is. Those were their thoughts. Then the last question, or the last opportunity for comment, was really just sort of a whatever people wanted. Sort of the good, I think I put in the parentheses, tell me the good, the bad, the ugly. So there are some comments about the venue. So we used the middle school auditorium, and it wasn't, I'd be perfectly honest, it was intentional, because I wanted a close, the high school auditorium is beautiful and it's big, and people tend to migrate towards the back. So I really wanted, for this particular conversation, especially with Dr. Warnham, people to be sort of a little more up close and engaged in the conversation. And the middle school auditorium is it's smaller, so it suits for that. However, the lighting really wasn't great, especially to be able to see the presenter. So I think in hindsight, some people offered this, maybe we just have to think about how to section off the high school auditorium, because it is a beautiful facility, and some people said that we've got this beautiful facility, why didn't we use it? But so that's again, those are comments. And then others believed, some people reflected that maybe the data could be presented differently, like that we didn't need to do it all sitting there. It could have been done. Some people said you could have just sent this in an email. I personally think it needed a little more context than that, but that was their thought. And then comments on the amount of time, that we were sitting for too long. Mine was a 90-minute presentation. Hers was a little bit short of 2 hours. You'll see that reflected in both. And again, those were those comments. And then there were several comments that just reflected appreciation for the fact that we were willing to dive into this conversation, and that we didn't ignore it, and that we are working towards addressing it. So those were for my bit, and then we're going to go essentially through the same pattern for Dr. Warnham. So you will notice people thought she was much more of an expert than I am, and she is. She's much more significantly highly rated in 5s. And you'll see again on the next one her ability to gauge. She is a very engaging presenter, and she's humorous. She offers opportunities for the audience to interact. She's energetic. She's got a great message. She knows her stuff. And that's reflected very much. I had seen her this summer as sort of like a pre-scouting mission to see if she would be a good fit for us. So I already had a sense of this, but I was glad that sort of my impression of her rather, the staff felt equally the same. And then you can see here, this is like a almost resounding yes about whether or not she provided the staff with tools that they could actually bring back and apply directly to their practice. You'll actually see in the comments, most people just wanted more. But she was really deliberate on sort of just starting the conversation because it's a big topic and we have a lot of work to do. And then when we look at whether or not they would recommend this comment, it's funny, like nobody said that they were in the room, but and so I don't know, take that as it is. But again, you can see an overwhelming positive response for her, and that this was good professional learning that participated in. And actually, in the comments, there was like several people that said something to the effect of like, "This is the best professional development that I've participated in the last, X number of years." So again, this was in sort of the comment section, and again, there's a link there that brings directly to the actual comments, but my summary of them around what people's big takeaways were, that there were multiple statements that referenced our need to tackle these topics head on, and that the commenters really appreciated her helping us develop an actionable definition of cultural proficiency, sort of where she started. She sort of gave us an academic definition of cultural proficiency, and really just kind of said for us, it's not really, it looked nice, and it would be great, something that's on a website. It doesn't really help you know what it is you're supposed to do. It's not instructional, were her words. So then she ran us through a bunch of different examples and some nice conversation that really helped you really think about what it is that she was talking about. The second was around reflection, which was one of the things that she had us do, was really sort of reflect on who we are and what we bring. So people really, that message really resonated with people with doing a lot of self-reflection around their own culture, around their own bias, around their own, where does judgment come from? Like when we find ourselves judging, like how might our culture, or the culture that we bring, be affecting those judgments? And then she said that then sort of the next step with that is then sort of how we view, everybody views the world through a particular lens, and then how when we get when something doesn't feel right to us, when we're upset about something with a student, but oftentimes it's because the lens that we're viewing the world through and the lens that they're viewing the world through are not matched up. And so that was another message that really resonated with people. And she has some great examples that I think really sunk in with people. And then her next message, which is around studying your students. So once you've done the personal reflection, then you have to do some deep dives into really knowing who your students are and what they bring to school with them, and honoring who they are when they come in the door. And so people really appreciate the practical steps that she gave for them to better know their students. And then the last was just sort of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then there was a resounding, for more. They wanted more with her and wanted to know sort of where as a district we were going to go next. And then there were, again, the comments about the space and about for sitting for too long. And I do think if we or not if, when we do some further work with her, I do think we're gonna structure it differently, not in an auditorium setting. But I think in order to do what we needed to do, which is really come to some common understanding around some key terms, it was like a stand and deliver model for that particular need was the right one for that time. But when they came back to the buildings, they broke up and did small group work. So we're gonna, as we move forward, it'll be more of that type of work going forward. And that is it.
Great, thank you. Questions, discussion? Sharon?
Are there any little brief things that you can remember that this woman said? I thought that looking through different lenses was very profound.
Yeah, so she gave us so one example that she talked about, I just lost the term, thin slicing. So she talked about, which was something that resonated a lot with people, which is this concept, all of our brains do this, that the brain is actually designed to filter out information because there's so much stimulation that goes on, visual, auditory, all your thinking, it's all going on at all this time. And our culture, and everybody has culture, that was another message she said, because a lot of people like myself, like white folks, we say we don't have culture. And she said everybody has culture, and she sort of broadened the definition of culture for us. And so anyway, she's talking about that we very, very quickly, like in nanoseconds, filter out information, and our culture impacts what we filter, and so what we highlight, what we don't highlight, what we prioritize, what we don't prioritize. Like she used the example that she's a granddaughter of a Baptist preacher, and she talks about, she opens with that, right? And she goes on, and then she comes back to her example a little bit later, and she talks about, she says, how many of you in the room, when I said I was the granddaughter of a Baptist preacher, assumed that it was my grandfather I was talking about? It wasn't, it was her grandmother. And then she talks about how she's grown up in a strong matriarchal culture, and where women are like powerful and boisterous, and so the thing that she struggles with as an educator is the quiet girl who sits in the back of the room, and for her, her sort of culture pushes her to say that child is it's an area of weakness and somewhere where it needs to grow, because that's like if you're if women are boisterous and powerful and have a strong voice in her culture and her upbringing, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the right fit for that kid. That kid can be learning just as well in that classroom, just because it's not demonstrated in the way that she's used to seeing it. That's where sort of her lens of the world is rubbing up against that child's culture, because that child might be coming from a culture where women have more diminutive role, and it doesn't mean that kid's paying any less attention in my classroom and is any less successful in my classroom. So that was one small example of some great ones that she gave us.
But that is a great one, thank you.
Tina?
I just wanted to say how much I appreciate this, because we lived in the Washington, D.C. area for 13 years, and I was reading my daughter's college essay last night, just before she hit it, and she wrote about going to elementary school as a minority of where she was versus being here, and kind of what she learned from the cultural differences. So I really appreciate this. The question I had, with just reading some of these comments, it looks like people were speaking to the different learning and processing styles. I guess some of the participants having to get up and move around, and the time, and I was just curious, was that intentional on your part to have them sitting?
Yeah, in a previous survey where we had something that was all day, they had reflected that, and I said to them, we took that information, we've broken the day up, and I broke it up by doing 90 minutes, then there was a break where they were able to get up and move, and then there was Dr. Warner, then there was lunch, then they came back and did small group stuff in the afternoon, but people reflected that they would have preferred even some more breaking up, which, I don't know, the snarky side of me says, I've been in some classrooms where I see kids sitting for that long, and so we could probably push that practice right into the classroom as well. However, that's just me being snarky. I do think there was sometimes there's a need to deliver information in one way, and I really felt, And after talking with Dr. Warren, like, we wanted to make sure that we built some common understandings around what is cultural proficiency, what is implicit bias, what are microaggressions. Like, there was like sort of some terminology that we wanted to get common as a base. And then moving forward, the work with her will be more digging in and would be more sort of set up for a different style of teaching than that particular piece. We're just sort of trying to lay the background knowledge. So I understand where people are coming from, and and we will adjust it moving forward.
The other question I had, there was a comment that said, it looks different at the elementary level though. So is this a mixture then of high school, elementary? Tell me again.
It was the whole district, yeah.
Okay, so it was the whole district. Okay. All right. Yeah, very interesting. Thank you for
Terry.
doing this.
I echo Tina, excellent material to get all of us involved in, probably that hidden curriculum that, in my experience, years and years and years, never really was touched. I can recall years past having some training where, similar to what the doctor said, that all of us come to that experience, this being classroom teacher, with psychological imprints. And these start when the day we were born. And all of us grow through that and bring to whatever vocation we have, in this case, classroom teachers. And every once in a while, we have what might be called, when something triggers it, leakage, where a teacher says something incorrect based on something that he lived through when they were 9 years old. So it's amazing, and it's never finished, as far as causing all of us to grow up.
One of our
So it's heartening to hear that whether the seating was too long or it was not comfortable, that's, I think, excellent stuff for a huge amount of people in our profession to get an insight and say, boy, that's so true.
Yeah, and she was, I thought she did an excellent job of, too, is just, she wanted to make sure that we didn't, how am I trying, like that, we have to become comfortable with making mistakes, you know, and so she actually gave a sort of a process for if something happens and we say something that offends, that it's not about then taking that person and placing them in this box, right? So she used the phrase, like, if we say something racist, we don't then put that person in a box and label them as a racist, and that's because that's it. You close the conversation down. You know, if we say something racist or if we say something that's offensive, like, own it. I said that, I didn't, it wasn't my intent or whatever, and we move forward from that spot, as opposed to, she talks about, like, culturally or like societally is probably a better phrase, like, we're just like super quick to, like, we label somebody, as opposed to labeling and naming the moment and addressing the moment and dealing and repairing the harm that may have been caused in that moment and moving forward from there. Because when we take somebody and we place them over here in this corner and we label them, we shut down further conversation and nothing ever moves forward, it grows.
Just a follow-up, the credit goes to all these classroom teachers that come out of universities trained and then they grow through their 40 years or whatever. It's ideal if you're a tutor one-on-one with a youngster and you have had this exposure to culture and how does one handle that for an hour. Once someone assigns you 15 or 17 boys and girls, regardless of their grades, that's a challenge for that pro to be up front and to balance statements and comments and follow-up, reinforcements to those 14 or 18 or 20, whatever the number is, and never make a mistake.
Thank you, Terry.
Just
Tina?
one last comment, and again, I'm gonna stress, because we've got the Global Studies program, and I think this is just really, really wonderful, particularly for, I think we're trying to go as a district, so kudos, I think this is great.
Dr. Carpenter?
Just to, for the committee's sake and for those that are out there in TV land listening, I think I asked Mark to put this on the agenda for two reasons. The first, so that people can understand what did teachers do for for that teacher workshop day, which I think sometimes is a big mystery to folks. And the second is, so that you as a committee can kind of understand, this is where the strategic plan's coming alive. So we had, as part of the strategic plan, close the achievement gap is our third objective. Our first initiative under that was to improve our support for differences of all types within Monomoy's classrooms we specifically had as action steps under that initiative to include in the FY20 budget monies for professional development and to begin the process of cultural proficiency PD, this year. So that's all, this is what, we're doing in terms of moving the strategic plan forward. I'd also like to, just give Mark a little appreciation. I think to be relatively new in the district and to step up and have, begin a day of difficult conversations, I think was really bold on your part, and I appreciate you doing that. I think Mark was really the point person there to build the case for urgency that, that we have, we have children who are underperforming in this district relative to their peers, and there are cultural aspects connected to that. There's a disproportionate number of our minority students that are in that bottom quartile, and and we need to sort of understand that we have sets of children who have certain certain aspects about them, and understand that group better so that we can better connect with them and hopefully elevate them out of that bottom quartile and see a lot better success from them.
Great, thank you. I echo Dr. Carpenter, great job, and thank you for taking that on. I mean, perhaps maybe Dr. Warnham should have done the entire presentation, but
Yeah, I know.
I wouldn't take that, I wouldn't take that personal. I think,
Don't take it personally.
just like anything, you've got to eat your vegetables before you get your dessert, so you've got to sit there for the hour and a half sometimes, and I think a lot of the teachers, they're up and moving all the time. They're not used to sitting there for an hour and a half, but sometimes that's the tough job, and that's what you have to do, so I appreciate your integrity with that. Thank you. Moving on, the replacement lease for the digital media lab. We've been asked to, this is the replacement of the current 3-year lease, which funds the media lab equipment, and I'll let Katie take it from there.
Katie Isernio, business manager. If you recall, this was the first venture we went into to lease technology to keep it current, so that we wanted to make sure, especially in the area of our media lab that puts together the work under Stephen Cass's program, have the kids working on the most current Apple products. That just tends to be what works well. So this lease is up in November, the first one. So I went out to solicit quotes using ComBuys, the state contract vehicle, and we received 3 quotes. We need to then send back the product that we have now. We'll ship that back, and then we'll ship new ones. The first lease we did was for 36 months, but in talking with Jim and with Stephen, 48 months, the equipment has another, we feel that we could use it another year and lease it over 4 years as opposed to the 3 years, and then send it back. So Ontario Investments was the company, and I don't know if anyone has any specific questions about anything that we need, but it's our effort to keep the kids working on the most up-to-date current technology that they have.
Ms. Scott?
Just a question, it just says that the renewal is a part of the FY20 budget discussions, but it's in the FY20 budget line item.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
And the amount is comparable to what we have?
It's actually a little less.
Nice.
Little less.
It's all right, a little less is better than a little more.
Exactly.
I think a little less.
Right.
Thank
But
you.
we're also hanging on to the same equipment for 4 years versus 3.
Right.
Any questions for Ms. Isernio? Would anyone like to make the motion? Ms. Scott?
I will therefore move to approve the contract with Ontario Investments, Inc. for $50,599.48. Contract is for financing of the Media Lab at the Monomoy Regional High School for 48 months to be paid in 4 annual installments of $12,649.87 each. Request for quotes was obtained through ComBuys, received 11/6/19.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Any noes? Motion carries. you. Next item on the agenda is the job description for business manager. We previously were in executive session and approved the business manager position description. Is there a motion?
Want
Do we
to discuss publicly why?
discussion?
Well, it's just, I
Has
think,
it been,
yeah, so,
Yeah.
so
The second.
we were,
Oh,
we were just making sure that we fine-tuned a job description for the Monomoy Regional School District Business Manager position, as Ms. Isernio, unless she changed her mind, intends to retire 6/30/2020. And, yeah, so we need to go through a process of finding a successor to her, and there will be very big shoes to fill. But we had also talked about a timeline that would go along with the business manager job description that we fine-tuned, that would have a January 9th screening abutting our school committee meeting on the 9th, with the goal of taking vote January 23rd to identify a successor who would begin on July 1st, 2020.
So the motion would be to approve the amended business manager description.
not,
I would second that.
we have to have a motion first.
I was just saying what it would be. I wasn't actually putting a motion out.
And I won't second that. I'll just sit here and
It's
ask for
okay.
public comment.
Not till the end, Terry. Discussions or comments, Ms. Scott?
I move to approve the business manager job description that we approved in executive session.
I would second that, yes.
Questions or discussion? My question is, do we need to effective immediately? Posted effective immediately?
And we will post that effective immediately.
Would you like to amend your motion?
No, I don't want to amend it, I'm just going
Okay.
to re-motion and just
Okay.
say that the move to approve the job description of business manager that we approved in an executive session with a immediate posting?
Posting. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstentions? Noes? Motion carries. And, Harwich Elementary School YMCA program update and discussion. Dr. Carpenter?
Just to be clear, is this the after-school program or the infant toddler?
This is the Harwich Elementary School YMCA in place of the MCLP program update and discussion.
Just so they formally started last week, on the 4th, right? Yeah, so this week, we are in November now, aren't we? Yeah, so they formally started November 4th, and I know that there are a couple families that are reaching out for clarity. I think there was one email that the YMCA mistakenly sent out to families. The YMCA does run a program at their Barnstable facility across from Cape Cod Community College that operates not on a school year model, and they sent out sort of a reminder to families about that they're open during the vacations, and there were some families that were like, we're not paying for after-school care the day after Thanksgiving. So they've been communicating back out to families that they accidentally sent the memo out to all the preschool programs that they run, and needed to have a separate memo for the school district ones. And I know that there are some families that are going through some, just adapting to, whatever minor changes the YMCA had relative to the program that was there before, which I know, I would say we have that every year, even with the program that runs in Chatham, that, there'll be things like a wait list, in the past, and oftentimes I suggest to folks that email in, reach out to the principal and, Robin in Chatham or Mary in Harwich, and she can work with them and the after-school provider to go and resolve hopefully most of those little snafus that come up. And because I think that they're in the process of trying to resolve many of those that do come up.
Has an updated schedule of days that the program is open versus the days the school is open and closed gone out since those changes, or since the contact of what the holiday situation is?
I don't know.
Okay. So my question would be, what are we doing to notify our families in this program now to make sure they understand and are clear with what days the program is available, what days, if they don't attend, are they still responsible for paying for? And I think there was also clarity needed for 2-week notice when their schedule changes and they are in need of care or are not going to be in need of care, and whether they're getting charged for that or not. I believe similarly the MCLP program ran that if you were not going to be available, you did not pay for that day. If you all of a sudden ran into something and you needed childcare for your child, you were able to add them to that schedule. And I don't know if any of that has been clarified for this new program. And I don't know if you can address this. Mary can address this, if she knows. There just seems to be a lot of confusion around the program. And if you can't answer it, Mary, it's completely fine. We can do it another day.
I'm Mary Olbeck, principal of Harwich Elementary. As I understand it, and I don't want to speak for the Y, if a family needs care on Mondays, they need to sign up for Mondays. And if they need care on Thursdays, they need to sign up for Thursdays. So MCLP operated on a model where the families were given a monthly schedule and they could circle the days that they wanted or needed. And with the Y, that if you need care on, say, 2 Wednesdays, you need to sign up for Wednesdays. And the rationale that I have been given for that is really around staffing because of the ratios that they need to ensure of the 10-to-1. There was one family, for example, who only needed care 4 days a month. And so the Y was, with this model, requiring them to sign up for every day. And it was a huge swing and differential from I want to say it was around $130 versus $500 and some odd dollars. And I referred them to the director at the Y, who's able to work something out where they can scholarship them out to some degree to make that work, but it still doesn't equate to just the 4 days a month that they need it. So that's considered more drop-in care, which the YMCA really doesn't accommodate. But most of our families are on a more regular schedule. It's the families that have the rotating work schedules. There are families with rotating work schedules that need more days than the 4 with that particular family where the scholarshiping out of the extra days is worked for them. And I've been downstairs the last couple of days checking on things, and things are going very smoothly, and the children are very engaged. And today they were doing watercolor painting of leaves and building, and had been outside on the playground, well, on our play area.
Yes.
And yeah, so it's this week it's been going very smoothly. So, yeah.
And how do they get, like, at the end of the day, like, how are they pulled from the clouds? Like, how does that work? Do they go down to pick up, or?
Yeah, so we used to, with MCLP, we used to just do one big dismissal of all after-school children, just came down to the cafeteria. And that was sometimes difficult to manage because of the volume of children coming down all at once. And before we can let the buses go, we have to kind of call an all clear, like parent pickup's all set, after school's all set, enrichment classes are all set before we let the buses go, so that we know everyone's where they're supposed to be. And I talked to the Y about that because it was kind of overwhelming on some days when we would have 80 children and we needed to get the all clear within like 8 minutes to try to get the buses on the way because we hold up the middle school or the high school. And their advice, and which was the approach that we adopted, is that the after-school staff were assigned by grade level and went to the classroom door and picked the children up. So at that point, we know exactly who's to be in after-school care. If they got dismissed, we find that out. If they're going to enrichment, we know that. And so by the time the staff comes down to the cafeteria with them, everything's all set. Yeah.
Great. Perfect, thank you.
You're
Any
welcome.
other questions? Ms. Scott?
Just I guess more of a comment or a question, a little bit of a question, but if a family is having challenges and they're having difficulty and the schedule isn't working for them, should they be going to you first, or should they be going to the Y first, or, if the financial aspect isn't the same, or,
Yeah.
major problems, would you?
Yeah, I definitely have them contact me, and I have been working with the Y. I think sometimes it's just raising awareness of what the family situation actually is. And the director of the site, as well as the director of the Y, Denise and Kelly, have been really wonderful about working with families as best as they can within the model that they have to function within. And, we have, most of our families have signed up again with the Y. Some families have opted for the Pilgrim Church program, which we also bus to as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think my main concern is just that I know that the model of the NCLP going into the year it seems like it's a little different than the YMCA
Yeah.
model.
Mhm.
And so it's just an adjustment period, and
Right.
financially, if you weren't prepared for that, in your budget for that adjustment period.
Mhm.
And I think Ms. Scott asked the right question of where you go with that.
Mhm.
And hopefully that a scholarship is available to be a little bit more flexible.
Mhm.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you. First reading of the superintendent goals for 2019-2020, subcommittee report. Is there someone who's representing the school superintendent goals this evening? Joanne?
I'll do it.
What does it say? You want to draw the short straw?
Yeah, apparently, which is fine. We decided not to read top to bottom,
Thank
so
you.
I'm going to just go through the professional practice goals, 4 of them, and then just a quick action plan, just so that there's a reason for that particular goal. As far as the rationale goes, it's in the document. So the first professional practice goal is expand community outreach by holding 3 conversations with the superintendent meetings over the course of the academic year. And it's to hold conversations with the superintendent either independently or in conjunction with the school committee. Tentative dates right now are Monday, November 18th, 2019, Monday, February 10th, 2020, and Wednesday, April 29th, 2020. And the superintendent will be allocating time for those evening meetings.
By each goal, yeah, that's fine. A comment, Ms.
I have a comment on that goal, Joanne.
Okay.
Minor point, but I know we've spent, in May, in fact, this may be in the school committee goals on a separate document, but I haven't got that in front of me. And we've been discussing this for 5 or 6 or 7 months. In my little weakened vision, I didn't see it as just a conversation with the superintendent. I saw it as a conversation with the superintendent and the school committee. Now, it states here that either independently or in conjunction. I think it should be a requirement and some of us can't make it that night, and there are going to be 3 nights. I would see it as really a potential improvement of the you know, the rationale goes on to say there's a pronounced schism within our community. I'd like to hear the schism. So maybe I'll be the first one not to be able to make these 3 dates. But I really think it's important. There's not just written here that if you can make it, good, but we'll get the report back from Dr. Carpenter. And I didn't see that as my point, and I'm only one vote. So I'd like to, whether it's in our school committee goals, and I thought it was, but I would like to see it as that all of us would attempt to attend those evening meetings, so we're listening to the 10 people, or the 20, or the 40, so.
And my understanding was that the school committee was going to have 3 separate meetings.
Independent of this?
Excuse me? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Terry?
Just yell it at me.
Then I misunderstood. When either I reinforced or I came up with this thought several months ago, but I saw it as 3 meetings, not 6. 3 that would include the majority of us as well as the superintendent with an open agenda, and one in the fall, one in the winter, one in the spring, and we'd be able to chat for an hour or 2 hours at a separate neutral site with those who come. I did not see it as we would have our separate 3 meetings independent of Scott attending.
And I think that was discussed, because when I went into this meeting on Monday, Tuesday, that's what I thought as well, and then it spread out to 6 meetings.
Ms. Scott?
We did talk about it, and Dr. Carpenter actually made the point saying that this is kind of dovetailing into what our school committee goals are, because our school committee goals do state that we would have some sort of open forum. And now that I was actually one that said, no, we should keep them separate. These should be for conversations with the superintendent, and yes, we should most definitely attend for 2 reasons. 1, we need to hear what everybody's asking, and 2, because we need to evaluate based on this goal, so we need to actually see. You can't, if it's televised, we could watch it, but that would probably not happen. So I would actually, I was, in my mind, thinking these were 2 separate entities, and, you know, Dr. Carpenter could have his 3 conversations as conversations with the superintendent and be open. People can email in, it says in the rationale, basically to find topics that are of interest at that time. And if there are no specific topics that come in, then he lists below that the November would be an open forum, February, if, again, this is if there's no pressing topics that needed to be discussed. The February would have kind of a budget focus, because that's right around the time we would look for our public hearing and the vote. And then April would be right before a town meeting, and therefore another budget, town meetings and process and stuff like that. And in my mind, when I was looking at them, I was thinking, well, those would be great to have just, you know, those be Dr. Carpenter's superintendent conversations, and then we, as a school committee, would have 3 open forums separate from those. And yet now, as you're saying it, it's saying, well, that would be 6 meetings, 3 times a year, all looking at the same time. I understand what you're saying, and I agree that it would be kind of silly to have meeting on November 18th with Dr. Carpenter, and then another meeting probably in December-ish with just the school committee, where he would probably attend anyways, I assume. And is it necessary, or we could dovetail our conversations, our open forums with the superintendent, and then it would be us being there. I did actually make the comment that we need to make sure that these meetings are posted, regardless of how they are anyways, so that we can have the open conversation. But I think that what you're saying makes perfect sense, and that it should, we're not voting on the actions, we're voting on the actual goal. But I think that the action could be conversations with the superintendent in conjunction with the school committee, and then if we find the need, we can always add another public forum if something comes up. You know, I really enjoyed what Charles said in the beginning about having a forum, just basically saying, this is how we start the budget, this is how we start budget season. So just, that was my 5,000 cents.
I would echo, I think I'm echoing Terry, but I'm not quite sure, but I think our school committee goals and the superintendent's professional practice goal are 2 separate things, yet this specific goal just overlaps. So it naturally, we're working together which is nice, because that's typically, that's what we're supposed to be doing. But I think the wording of it is fine as long as everyone understands that we have a school committee goal of the same thing with the same intentions, so that this goal and our goal together would be, we would be attending this. I don't know if the action item or the goal has to say anything more than it does, as long as everyone on the school committee understands where those two overlap. Scott, Ms. Scott.
Typically, our school committee goals drive the superintendent goals anyways, so it makes perfect sense for his goals to overlap ours.
Sure.
So I like the idea of having the 3 meetings because we have a hard enough time getting enough people to attend, so I think it would be more dynamic to have the 3. But I also heard what Charles shared at the beginning, and I'm wondering if it might be more of this for the superintendent in answering and questions and all, but maybe for our aspect, and I don't mean to make this completely separate, but to have a listening part. I really like the idea of having some listening time.
Isn't that what this is? Where they can come
Well,
and
they may have
talk
questions.
Right. It's an open forum meeting.
Quick question, because I didn't get the rest of that down here. Sharon, you said a listening session is what,
Well-
would that be part of the meeting?
Yes, but I think we'd have to structure it because my idea of a listening time is that we don't present very much. We listen, people say things, we make notes. We might say something, but we're not giving a whole lot of information about that. And another aspect that I had thought that this would be, for the superintendent's goal, would be more questions, back and forth with questions. So there'd
Terry?
be more answers instead of just listening.
Terry?
Not to beat a dead horse, but to roll it over a bit. Clearly, in my mind, 6 meetings is slightly overkill. I do think when we discuss this, and it's a good point that all of us, in Mark's presentation with the doctor on cultural listening, how we all could hear different things. And we've been discussing this for at least 2 or 3 hours over a period of 7 months, that if we added 3 independent meetings seasonally, and all of us who were there who could come, as well as the person who's our agent in all areas, and we get 10 additional people to come, or 20, and it catches on, that's a huge plus. Now, Sharon, you mentioned listening. Hey, I don't think any meetings the school committee attends without the superintendent should have our own agendas. So we come and then enforce what a parent mentions regarding preschool, or about how we choose our teams and how coach, whatever it might be, we could add how we, so the folks, 10 of them, 40 of them would say, what's Russell talking about? I don't understand him. Oh, gee, that's a good point from Joanne. So I just hope that as we, and I know there's a blending, that we maybe reach an understanding tonight that that's what at least one of us thought we were trying to do. We'd all attend as best we could, these 3, and they'd be topical but open agenda.
I think we're overthinking it. I think
Yeah, I
it's
do
a
too.
conversation with the superintendent. The intention of the school committee is to start attending these, at least 3. The intention of the superintendent is to host 3. If we do more than 3, by golly, we've all gone over our goal. If we have 3 that have great attendance, and we have great conversations and discussion, because it's an open forum, and we do have a topic, so at least there's a starting point. That's the best you can expect.
So, Madam Chair, I do think then the action has to be corrected, because it says hold conversations with the superintendent, either independently or in conjunction. So
I
It's
think
fine.
you just
Yeah.
cross out the,
I think you have to get
Either
rid of the.
cross out the,
E.
I'm sorry.
Ms. Scott?
My brain is going way too fast. Just cross out either independently or,
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
and under the actions.
Yep. That was the easy one, too.
Can I, Madam Chair, can I ask
As
just
long
a,
as Scott wants to talk with us in conjunction.
I just have a clarifying question if I can
Ms.
ask.
Gaines.
So, with the conversations with the superintendent before this last forum that we had back in, whenever it was, February, March, I believe you had coffees with the superintendent. So was that something similar? Because those were always at the schools and more with the, what I would call the school community versus the larger community.
Yeah, and we would have coffees. I tried Saturday morning with donuts and coffee, and I think there were 2 parents that I was able to go and send home with a dozen donuts each.
Yeah.
But, but I appreciate that last winter we had many people, and I think, sometimes it's what's the hot button issue that is gonna bring people out. Not that I'm saying we're gonna unleash a hot button issue to necessarily bring people out, but I think there was something in the moment, and I don't know if it's playground or changes in after school or that might bring people out.
Yeah. And Madam Chair, I don't know if this is appropriate for me to just throw out, but I was asked, I guess this past weekend, if we would consider as a school committee member, because I was making a report, I was there, and it was asked if we could do a state of the schools forum and have it here at the high school, and there were 2 pretty good sizable groups that were interested in doing that. So I think there's potential there for having good turnouts.
Yep. All right, great. Thanks, Joanne. I think if everyone's content with professional practice goal number 1, can we move on to number 2?
Okay, professional practice goal 2, support the professional growth of Monomoy's primary evaluators through learning walks. Visit classrooms with each primary evaluator using the following focal points. And they're called look-fors: engagement, learning objectives, critical thinking by the students, differentiation, and grade-appropriate tasks. Mark Smith, just thought you ought to know. Work with Mark Smith to discuss incorporation of these 5 focal points. So, your name's right there.
Director of the CIA?
Undercover?
Yeah.
Any questions or discussion on that professional practice goal? Comments, concerns, wordsmithing? Joe's not here.
I know.
Quick, move on.
It's not here.
Joe's not here.
Okay. Joanne? Please continue.
Student learning goal number 1, formally institute data conversations with the principal and superintendent as part of principal's evaluation process. And that's meet with the principals twice each year formally, writing up a data conversation as part of the evaluation process. Data discussed will include year-to-year MAP growth, year-to-year MCAS growth by building faculty, including disaggregation of the bottom quartile and high-risk groups, AP results, attendance and graduation data, SEL and school climate, and parent outreach involvement data. So it goes back to looking at exactly what Mark had talked about, so.
Great, thank you, Joanne. Any
Move
questions
for
or
growth.
discussion on student learning goal 1? Moving on to district improvement goal number 1.
Move the strategic plan forward through monthly school committee presentations, presenting monthly reports to the school committee, reporting out progress on 1 or more of the strategic initiatives. And that will become part of our agenda.
Questions or discussions?
Good on that one? Okay.
Moving on to district improvement goal number 2.
And district improvement goal number 2, continue to support district families by collaborating with community partners to expand early childhood options, finalizing arrangements and launching infant, toddler, and preschool programs at Harwich Elementary, in conjunction with the YMCA, CDI, and Head Start preschool at Chatham Elementary. So it's using the available classroom spaces, support this initiative. Some cost to add bathroom facilities on Chatham Elementary School classroom may be required. I would say in. Bathroom facilities in Chatham Elementary, just get rid of the on.
The only comment I would make on that is that maybe something in the spring as far as timeline or benchmark beyond the December 1st. Up to the November 21st update, but, and then we're gonna prepare a report for us and for the selectmen by December 1st, but maybe something in the spring to kind of wrap it up. Or plans for summer, how that's gonna work, and then fall anticipation. I know nobody wants to wordsmith that, but Ms. Scott has it, looks like.
No, I don't know if we necessarily need to wordsmith the goal. I think the goal is fine. I think that
Right, no, just
we
the
can go
timeline.
back to the timeline,
Yeah.
so just kind of where our heads were at. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Didn't we, with the timeline, I think we said we were gonna approach it next week?
Right, so
Yeah.
we kind
Yeah.
of wanted to try to get an initial goals here because it is November.
Yep.
So if we were able to approve the goals from the whole committee at our next meeting, we are still fine tuning the individual timeline benchmarks.
So if we make any
as-
decisions tonight,
We're not making any decisions anyways, this is, so we're just doing the first
First
reading
reading.
of the goals. And then we have another subcommittee meeting next week, sometime, one of the days.
Yep.
And we're going to discuss the ultimate timeline for when we wanna have the evaluations due. We were discussing the benefits and drawbacks to having an election cycle evaluation versus a school year evaluation cycle.
that's fine.
And then also, the indicators, talking about which indicators to focus on. So,
Yeah.
we're just looking to
So
try
if we
to
can
get
approve the goals on the 21st, then we can maybe just mention that we'd like a spring update. That's fine.
Yes.
It's fine. I think that was the last goal. Any other questions or discussion regarding the superintendent's goals 2019, 2020? All right. Oh, Mary?
Just a quick comment that, since I'm the newbie, I just appreciated that, because I'm on the subcommittee for this, that the goals that Dr. Carpenter was thoughtful about thinking about what his goals were last year and kind of building or digging deeper this year when he was rewriting or writing the goals for this year. So I appreciated that.
Thank you. Okay, and we have first readings of, it looks like 7
6.
policies. And then we have second readings of 3, which will all need vote required. So let's start with, Sharon, are you doing this? Okay, great.
So the first of the first
Safety rules.
readings is safety programs. Accidents are undesirable, unplanned occurrences that can result in tragic consequences, bodily harm, loss of school time, property damage, legal action, and even fatality. The school committee will guard against such occurrences by taking precautions to protect the safety of all students, employees, visitors, and others present on school property or at school-sponsored events. The committee will comply with safety regulations established by governmental authorities and will insist that its staff adhere to recommended safety practices as these pertain. For example, to the school plant, special areas of instruction, student transportation, school sport, and occupational safety. That's one addition. And then as you move down to the 4th paragraph, we're talking about safety programs. It will be the responsibility of the superintendent to see that appropriate staff members are kept informed of current state and local requirements related to fire prevention, civil defense, sanitation, public health, and occupational safety. And further down on instructional programs, they just add accident prevention, emergency procedures, traffic. And at the end, the last paragraph, they add, efforts directed towards the prevention of accidents will succeed only to the degree that all staff members recognize that preventing accidents is a daily operational responsibility. Okay, next. State ethics conflict of interest. The first change is just a gender, expanding the gender from him to him, her. And then the last paragraph is added, every 2 years, all current employees, including school committee members, must complete the State Ethics Commission online training. New employees must complete this training within 30 days of beginning employment and every 2 years thereafter. Upon completing the program, employees should print out the completion certificate and keep a copy for themselves. Employees will be required to provide a copy of the completion certificate to the municipal or district clerk through the superintendent's office.
Any questions or discussion on that one?
I do have a question, and I'm on the subcommittee, but I do have a question. Employees will be required to provide a copy of the completion certificate to the municipal. So do we have a choice there, or to the municipal or district clerk? So it looks like we have a choice on how it's filed, or should it be filed in both places? As far as the conflict of interest, or not, is that what it is?
Mary?
It's ethics, I mean.
I think, remembering the conversation, it was added in there because for school employees, it would go to the district, where for school committee members, it would go to the town.
Okay. Okay, yeah.
She gets a gold star.
You do get a gold star. I just want to make sure mine was filed correctly, because
And
mine is with the municipal.
I apologize, but I did not ask if anyone had any discussion or questions on safety program, but it looked a little quiet, didn't look like anyone did. If you do, let me know. Thank you, Ms. Gaines. Staff ethics, anyone else? Any clarification on that one? All right, moving on to staff conduct.
Staff conduct, the only changes are the word regulations was changed to procedures on number 3, and on number 6, it adds including the need to ensure that students are under supervision at all times.
Okay.
Next on staff
Thank you.
participation in political activities, it's all the same except the gender is expanded to his/her.
Any questions or discussion on that? Okay.
Tobacco use on school premise by staff members. Use of any tobacco products, including but not limited to cigarettes, cigars, little cigars, chewing tobacco, pipe tobacco, and snuff, and electronic cigarettes, electronic cigars, electronic pipes, or other similar products that rely on vaporization or aerosolization within the school buildings, school facilities, on school grounds, or school buses, or school-sponsored events by any individuals, including school personnel, is prohibited at all times.
It's pretty clear. Any questions on that one?
Don't do it.
I believe it just says don't use tobacco.
That's right.
Student records?
Student records. If you go to page 3, I'm just going to highlight the top areas. You'll have to read them because there's too much. It includes areas about the transcript, collection of data, limitations and requirements for that, personnel files of employees, privacy and security of student records, destruction of school records, and further on page 5, amending the student records, and that's a notification, at least once during every school year.
Any questions on student records? Okay. Now we're going to move on to the second readings of KCD, KHB, and IMG, which are vote required. We will start with public gifts to the schools. This is our second reading. Is there a motion to approve, motion to approve?
I'll try. Oh,
I move to approve, that's accepted with that paragraph added that we've already read. Public gift to schools.
Read
Want me to read the whole
the
thing?
letters.
No, just read the, I approve the
Oh.
KCD public gifts,
KCD.
public gifts to the schools. Okay. Is there a second?
I'd
Second.
second that.
Terry, yep. All in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions? No. Motion carries. The second reading of KHB advertising in school. Is there a motion?
What is that?
I move to approve file KHB advertising in schools policy.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. And the second reading of IMG service animals.
IMG, I move to approve animals in school.
Second?
Second. Aye. Second.
Second by Mary. All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions? No's? Motion carries. All right. Yes, Ms. Scott.
I'm sorry, can I go back to the student records one?
Yep.
Not the first reading ones. There's a file
second reading?
JR, the first,
Yep.
not the ones we just approved.
Yep.
The file
JRA.
JRA, and then there's file JRAR. Is that all just file JRA, or is that two separate policies? So they should all be file JRA?
Yes.
Okay,
Should all be fine, Jane.
thank you.
Superintendent's report.
Let's see, three topics. Just first, to provide the committee an update on everything related to the Harwich Elementary School playground that happened since
Oh, it's up?
your vote last meeting. So when we last met on October 28th, or sorry, when we last met, you voted to, on my recommendation, to close the playground. The Board of Selectmen met a couple days later and voted to demolish the playground. We had a meeting with Harwich Elementary families the following day on the October 29th. There wasn't a ton of turnout from parents, but we had a few came. They were sort of running the spectrum of sort of different places that they were in with regard to the playground. There was one mother who was just very concerned what recess would look like in the interim, and was sort of describing a child who just needs to get out there and run. And I thought Mary and Sharon shared with the parents just all the different things that that children are doing on the hardtop out there. So it's sort of a return to old school playground time or recess time with jump rope, and I guess they were even showing pictures of cornhole and hula hoops, and had talked with the parents that they actually have many more different games, but just like we did when my children were young, you would sort of cycle the toys, sort of put them out sometimes and take them away, so that there was sort of like new novelness. So there's a plan to actually cycle many of the different things that the kids play with. The following day, demolition began, and by Halloween, the playground was fully demolished, and all the chips that were sort of the ground material removed and scooped out, and dirt spread and leveled out there. And I'd really appreciate the Harwich DPW came in. Now, the committee went and voted to offset the cost to the town in the tune of $20,000, but the DPW crew, it was just amazing just how fast they clearly they were professionals that knew what they were doing on in excavators. You wouldn't want the superintendent out there with the excavator, but they did a great job. We had a meeting at the Board of Selectmen on this past Monday, the 4th. The Board of Selectmen voted to be the applicant on the CPC grant. They had Chris Clark sort of introduce the CPC presentation, which happened on Tuesday, and then turned it over to Justin Tavano. Justin did a fabulous job. We had a large number of parents and even elementary students came out to the presentation, and I thought the meeting went well. I think it was. I think the project itself was heard favorably by those in attendance, and I think many were just sharing the the concerns that there's a limited pot of money, and there was a lot of questions about what sort of additional fundraising efforts might be going on. But that is moving forward, and so we'll look forward to the fundraising and supporting that CPC grant. The second thing that happened since last we met, we had the NEASC visiting team came in here, and it was a good, I think, a good experience for the school to go through. I mean, it was a NEASC visiting team coming in over 10 years ago that was sort of a catalyst for Monomoy Regional School District to come together. It was the need for a new high school that really helped drive us coming together as Harwich and Chatham to form Monomoy. Having been on visiting committees on both sides, on two different on two different high schools that had visiting committees come in over my high school career, and having been on visiting committees going into schools, you can kind of get a feel from the tone of the chair's report as they leave, how that visit went, and it was, I think it seemed to be a very positive visit. In fact, as I've been going through this joint MASC-MASS conference in Hyannis the last couple of days, I've had different administrators who had staff that were part of that visiting team come and comment about the feedback that they had gotten about our district. That was all, again, very positive. So it was a positive thing. And we know that a couple months from now, when the report does come out, the purpose of a visiting team is to push the district to continual improvement. Now, we know that there are things that we need to go and work on and improve. I mean, we have a strategic plan that's based on continual improvement. But I also know that that if you come into this building, you know that you've got a great school culture. The chair of the visiting team referred to our staff that maintain this building as rock stars. The facilities we have are just outstanding. So I look forward to the report and look forward to the recommendations and moving forward from that. The last thing, which now based on the whole superintendent goals discussion that I need to kind of discuss with you is my intention was to go and roll out and start publicizing a November 18th conversation with the superintendent. And when I came into this room, I had intended to have the conversation at Harwich Elementary, which seems to be the focal point for the most change, and I thought might be, if we were to have a superintendent conversation there's been a lot of moving parts going on that we might elicit more of our feedback from and families showing up there. And I also want to be sensitive to the fact that that since now this is a joint, not an individual thing, is Harwich Elementary School okay with the consensus of the board? If so, I'll start publicizing it. If not, do you want me to look towards the community center again? And we could do one of the meetings over the course of the year at the community center like we did last year. I'm also sensitive to the fact that it was, no good deed goes unpunished. When we had at the community center, we had some feedback. It's like, what, are you afraid to have, the forums at the school? Yeah, and I would be very happy to have, a forum that really focuses on the state of the schools. I think it's a great thing to have, and we can be really proud of what we've got here. So, location.
I think it's a great idea.
Yep.
I'll go twice.
I just checked my
I
calendar.
envisioned the Central Perk from Friends, like on a stage with all of us on the couches, just with big cups of coffee, just relax and there to answer questions. That's what I see. Just set the tone.
I was toying with it, a potluck, just, and
Who would call it? I'll bring cookies.
I love your spirit. Ms. James?
Okay, to answer that question, yes, I would agree, Harwich Elementary School for the first one, because I think we probably need to go to them, and they're probably there, so I would say yes to that one. I love the idea, going back to the state of the schools, of getting people in this high school that haven't been here. Now, whether they'll come or not, I don't know, but I have been speaking to people, and there are groups that have never been in this, and I think we're at a point where people are interested now.
that's when a potluck is gonna happen.
The potluck,
Well, maybe you can
okay.
start with a tour.
Yeah, and that's what I'm thinking. Maybe even invite some of our kids
To do
to
tours.
participate, so they can kind of see and be escorted by kids. I think there's a whole thing we can do. I have a quick question logistically, though. If we're, if it's a superintendent conversation with school committee, I'm assuming we have to post that
Yeah.
for ourselves as a public meeting so we can actually speak. Okay. All right. And I have a couple other questions on the report.
That's
Or
fine.
not questions, but comments. Going back to the playground thing, I just, when you were describing what was happening without the playground, I thought, wow, what a learning opportunity for these kids to learn about what did they do back in the day, and to introduce hopscotch and jump rope and all those fun things. And I thought, wow, that's a really nice teaching opportunity too. So I wanted to comment.
I know when I came to the district, Chatham had a long-standing jump rope team that I think has been
Oh,
sort of
wow.
temporarily lost in time, and it was interesting to hear the term double dutch
Yes,
come
that's
up
what I was, yeah.
in the conversation.
That would be fun, yeah. And the other comment I wanted to say about the accreditation, Sunday thing, I really loved seeing the kids involved. It was so, the tours, they were handling the hors d'oeuvres, and I really enjoyed that. And I was watching some of the evaluation team, and I was watching their eyes, observing the kids, and I thought, those kids were really happy, and I just loved the way that we worked them into that. Even the panel discussion that happened, the kids singing around us. I mean, I just thought it was great. I got goosebumps when they were singing, and so I just wanted to say that was an excellent integration of the kids.
One of the things that is a major eye-opener for people who come from off Cape here in particular, I think the further you get out on the Cape, so at the opening sort of welcome for the NIASC team, we had members of our Best Buddies program.
Yes.
And the reality is, if you go to suburban Boston, many of those children are outplaced in other schools. The schools look much more homogeneous when it comes to differences than on the Cape, and in part because there aren't options north-south, and there are limited options for outplacement. So the school district has adapted to go provide services within our schools. And I think it's been an important thing. My son was one of the ones who, they were reading a comment on what he's learned from the Best Buddies program. And, I know from my son, it's just that, this appreciation, that in our society, there are people who are, different than us. And, and I think he's realizing that when we were in the suburbs, they weren't in his school. but they're in his school, and he's learned to make connections with them, and I think even one of his college essays about just the laughs that they've had together.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, great. Any other questions or anything? Great, thank you for your feedback, Tina. And Scott, you're all set with, that's the end of the superintendent's report, right?
Every minute counts.
Every minute matters, yes. All right, moving on, we have a few more votes to do. The prior year invoice approval, yes, we have it in front of us. The Cape and Vineyard Electric Cooperative, it's just been asked by Katie for us to vote and approve this. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the prior year invoice for Cape and Vineyard Electric Cooperative in the amount of $241.02.
Second?
Second.
Reports, discussion, reports and discussions, yeah. Questions, discussion. There was a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, abstentions, motion carries. We did that. Ooh, declaration of surplus. I heard there was a fast and easy way to do this.
That's what I've been told. I move to approve the numerous items as surplus as presented in our packet from the Monomoy Regional School District Central Office, Monomoy Regional Middle School, and Chatham Elementary School. These lists are available at central office if needed.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Abstentions?
Thank you.
No? Second was
Tina.
Yep.
Yeah.
Motion carries. We now have an opportunity for public comment. Speakers are limited to 5 minutes. Additional time at the discretion of the chairperson. Is there anyone who would like to comment? Charles, take the wheel, buddy, but clock is ticking.
I just wanted to be the first one to go on record. Second public comment period on Monomoy School Committee meetings.
As well you should be.
And it was a good meeting. I leave knowing more about the system than I knew when I came in, and that made my time worthwhile. And I was very impressed by what's being done. As a member of the community who served on the Strategic Planning Committee, I was really thrilled with the report about the Professional Development Day because I saw a direct connection into that. I've heard from a number of educators in other districts in recent years that professional development days have been a waste of time because they haven't been planned out and organized well. Obviously, that's not the case in this district. And I like in the superintendent's goals, again, as a member of the Strategic Planning Committee, to get the ongoing regular accountability reports on strategic. I think that's terrific, knowing many school systems don't have a strategic plan, and other school systems that I'm aware of that don't really seem to make that a priority for the work that they do. And finally, just some thinking on the public hearings or listening session or whatever. Having worked in a 5-town regional district my whole career, we'd have meetings for the whole district. What we found was that people tended not to go out of their town to attend that for whatever reason. So there may want to be some thinking about, would it be important to have one of the meetings being held in Chatham, delivering a certain message? Again, perception is reality. So thank you very much.
Great,
Thank you.
Charles. Great utilization of the ending comments. Thank you.
Yes.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call?
No.
No? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Have a great evening. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, thank you.
How do I want to roll call that?
Roll call executive session.